So Sunita, it still says a practice session. So do we go ahead and start?
I think the participants are just joining us.
So I'll just give a minute or two to all the participants to start, and then, yeah.
Someone has their hand raised already.
Yes, we are waiting for everyone to enter, and then we'll start. All the participants are increasing. I think enough participants had joined, so we can go ahead and start. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Nishant Shokan. I'm an associate professor at Vinayaka Missions Law School. We are based out of Chennai under the aegis of Vinayaka Missions Research Foundation, deemed to be a university. Welcome to today's webinar on a fascinating and ever-evolving field of interdisciplinary approach and its profound impact on legal education. I'm thrilled to be your moderator for this. Let's see, it is going to be an insightful discussion today, right? So before inviting our panel members to share their views on the topic, I would first like to introduce today's topic and then move towards panel members, right? So Darwin has very famously said that it is not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change, right? And today, as we gather to discuss the interdisciplinary approach and its role in legal education, we must definitely reflect on the need for change within the institutions of law itself, right? For example, when we talk about COVID-19, right, it exposed the weaknesses of Indian legal system, with courts burdened by backlogs, aspiring lawyers facing unemployment, right? To overcome these challenges, we must reimagine legal education and embrace this particular approach that equips the current and the future legal professionals in the country. The legal education has been fascinating, right? But it has also been stagnant. When we talk about the current legal education model, it only focuses on legal knowledge and the skills which come with it, right? But it does not take that comprehensive, adaptable approach towards the education and how the legal education has been evolving, right? If I talk about the model towards which we should shift, for example, the Delta model, which takes into consideration the people, the process, and the practice element of it, right? For example, when we talk about practice, it encompasses foundational legal skills such as issue identification, legal analysis. And then we move towards process, it talks about like data analysis, right? Technology utilization, the public policy, the project management, and the people basically includes emphasis on emotional intelligence, problem solving, self-management, right? With that particular background, I would now like to introduce the panel members who will take you through the journey of the people, process, and the practice element of the new Delta model, which is there. So first of all, with us, we have Mr. Krishna Deo Singh Chauhan, who is an associate professor at Jindal Global Law School, which is also our mentor institution. The Jindal Global University has taken up the role as the mentors for Vinayaka Mission's Law School. Right? Mr. Krishna Deo Singh Chauhan is a graduate of National Law Institute University, Bhopal, and then he went to National University of Singapore. His specialization is intellectual property and technology law. Then with us, we have Dr. Devdulal Thakur, who comes with a different background, right? Who comes with a background of public policy and economics. In the past, he has been involved with, let's say, the projects which have been funded by World Bank, UNDP, UNICEF, and there are a lot more acronyms in the list, right? If I have to go through it, I can't, like, within the time which we have, right? Then with us, we have our own Ms. Samudita Srinath, who is, like, in her own right, is an accomplished academic in the field, who has a very interesting journey, right? From being a lawyer, then to going to Oxford University to pursue her degree in anthropology, right? So with these diverse backgrounds and the background into today's topics, I would now like to invite Mr. Krishna Deo Singh Chauhan to talk about the topic in his own understanding and in his own perspective. So over to you, Mr. Krishna.
Well, thank you very much, Nishant. And thank you very much also to bring, all of us together on this platform, on this fantastic topic, which is of very, very high relevance today. And I think you have given a very important, introduction to it. Before I go forward, just a very quick heads up. I am having a bad case of cough. So I just hope it goes well, but pardon me, I end up coughing a lot. So yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, something that you mentioned from where I will take a cue and build a topic further, which is the idea that, when we think about law, we think about rules and regulations. I think that's the first way of looking at law that most people I have interacted a lot of times with students who are aspirants and students who are just entering the law school, maybe part of the first year or the second year. And if I go and start with a general discussion about what law is, they usually say, well, law is rules and regulations. So this notion that that's what law constitutes of. It's not just that they're part of law. That's what law is I wouldn't say it's wrong, but it's certainly incomplete, because there is, of course, the other aspect, and especially students, they start learning that in addition to the substantive aspect, which are rules and regulations, there's also a lot of process, which is what you mentioned earlier. This notion of process too has become a very highly evolved notion, really. Process today no longer just constitutes procedural laws, which is something that the student also end up learning in exactly the same way. As they learn substantive subject, they learn this section says this, the other section says that, so on and so forth. But the role of process is really not exhausted by these procedural laws, because increasingly what is happening is that law itself is becoming a form of process. And maybe we can use some other terms here which are very important, which is another term I really like to use in this context is system. So legal system is, of course, another way of talking about this domain of law. But when this term enters the arena, the term of system, which is very closely related term from process, the idea is that it's no longer that linear model of law, which is that you take a certain set of facts, you take a certain set of principles and rules, you apply them, and you get a result. That's the the traditional model. When the system thinking comes into picture, what happens is that you are no longer just looking at law as rules. You are thinking that what can I do to achieve certain objectives? And this is, I'll talk from the perspective of a practitioner who would like to achieve certain results for their clients, which is what legal profession is all about. So processes and rules together form this system in which what you do is governed by the final objective that you're trying to achieve. And a lot of times that actually involves not going to a certain forum or a court or a regulator, instead doing something else, maybe negotiating, maybe taking it for other forms of alternate dispute resolution, sometimes settling, which is something that comes out of negotiation and mediation often. What I'm trying to get at through this discussion is that in order to become a fully equipped lawyer today, the core knowledge of law is, of course, very, very important. But to understand the way law actually works, interdisciplinarity becomes a key, because all of these systems that I am talking about, and objectives that I'm talking about, a number of times these objectives would be they would be stemming from, let's say, commerce, right? So these objectives would be very commercial in nature. As a lawyer, if we don't fully appreciate and understand the commercial aspect of it, another example I would certainly like to give, because I come from this background, so of course this is something that I personally feel very closely connected to, is the world of technology today. There is so much technology around, and technology companies have started playing so much role in each and every domain. So technical ends are also something, or if not technical ends, the technical aspects of those ends are also something that lawyers today need to appreciate more than anything else. So what I'm therefore would conclude with is that interdisciplinarity is really no longer, I would say that it's no longer an option. A law student must embrace interdisciplinarity. Law schools must embrace interdisciplinarity, and we have to start thinking in terms of specific objectives and how they can be achieved, whether it's for our client, whether it's for policy making, which is useful for the governments, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Krishna. So it has got me thinking about, whether interdisciplinarity is so important, and especially for today's lawyer or today's law aspirant, that we end up looking at law not just into, let's say, abstract, but also in relation to any or everything which exists today in the society, right? And when we are talking about society, I would definitely want to now invite Miss Samudata. Reason being is her journey has been fascinating, right? From being a lawyer, then going towards anthropology, and then embracing the particular field. Why am I mentioning it? Because usually the way or the journey for a particular person is from a particular degree towards a professional course like law, right? And she has done it the other way around. So I would definitely want to hear her views into it, and how the background into law and anthropology has helped her succeed in this particular field.
Thank you, Nishant. So just very quickly, because sometimes when I'm in my classroom interacting with my students, there's some confusion. So for the attendees who are here and who are not quite clear, anthropology is the study of society. So for me, it was a very obvious transition to move from, say, studying law, thinking about law, to trying to understand how society operates, because from what I understand, what I understood then as a law student, and what I understand now as someone who teaches law students, is that the law is essentially a social thing. But very quickly, before I get into it, I want to explain what I mean when I keep using the word interdisciplinary. So this is a bit of a buzzword. So for our attendees who are here today, who have attended any other admission seminar, I am sure you have come across the use of this word many times. And so what does true interdisciplinarity actually mean, right? Is it that you have a law school that offers you many subjects, many different kinds of subjects? And in a sense, that could be it. We will teach you psychology, we will teach you sociology, we will teach you history, and we will teach you the law subjects. But for a training in law to be truly interdisciplinary, it's not just that students study these subjects as separate things. It's also that students should be taught the subjects in relation to each other. And this is where I say it's because I think the law is a social thing. So there's two main points that I wanted to make. The first was to kind of show our attendees why I believe the law is a social thing. And that's because oftentimes when you're studying law, that's the first point. And the second point I wanted to quickly make is talk about how some of these things that you think are unrelated go on to hugely shape the law. So these are the two main things I wanted to flag over the course of the 5 minutes that I have with all of you. So with regard to the law being a social object, what I essentially mean is if you want to really understand the law, which you have to do before you can become a lawyer, it's kind of the prerequisite, you have to also understand some of the core debates within law. And to understand the core debates within law, you need to understand different perspectives on society, different approaches to understanding society, economics, psychology, anthropology. All of these things then shape your ability to understand the various tensions within the law. The example that comes to mind for me, only because I'm teaching this currently in my class, it's a bit of a heavy topic, but we recently had a discussion in the classroom about how, according to our IPC, the attempt to commit suicide is still a crime. And this has actually given rise to a lot of constitutional debates. Does the right to life include the right to die? And in its sort of final stand on this matter, the court has held that it's a positive right, which means that the right to life does not necessarily include the right to die. And thankfully now we have the Mental Health Act, which waters down the attempt to suicide provision and all of that. But at its core, our criminal legal jurisprudence still says that attempting to take your own life is a crime against society as a whole. However, the same criminal jurisprudence also upholds the death penalty. And there are all of these contradictions within the law that to a law student, it's very obvious, right? You're saying this on the one hand, the law is saying this on another. How does this make sense? And in order to make sense of this as a law student and later a lawyer, you need to understand why these tensions exist in the law. And the reason these tensions exist is because they come from opposing social currents in society. So at its core, the first need for interdisciplinarity is because without it, you don't fully understand the law. Otherwise, you just see it as a series of debates that sometimes just don't fully reconcile with each other. And the second reason, and it's a continuation of the first, that interdisciplinarity has always been essential to the study of law, but is becoming increasingly more so sort of required to be a lawyer, is because of how quickly society is changing. Now, the law fundamentally deals with the regulation of society. So society is changing today at a pace much faster than it ever has. And one of the biggest drivers of this change, and I'm sure Professor Chauhan, who practices in technology law, will be much better equipped to talk about it. One of the biggest drivers of this change is technology. And I'm not just talking about things like AI and self-driving cars, something as simple as courtrooms having to go online during, say, the pandemic. It pushed judges to have to reinterpret sections of your CRPC and your Evidence Act, because to be present had to be reinterpreted as being also to be present online. And suddenly that meant how present someone could be in a courtroom was also dictated by, say, the strength of their internet connection, the strength of the internet connection in the courtroom. And all of these aspects of technology create a social reality that then impact how the law is interpreted and how the law is carried out. So that's on the one hand. And the other hand is because very straightforwardly, and this is something Dr. Chauhan said, students straight away recognize the law is about regulation. Technology is fundamentally changing the spaces that we need to regulate human behavior on. So my favorite example of society changing law is actually how the laws of war, the IHL laws of war, have been pushed by various actions to be reinterpreted to include cyber warfare. And the reason this is my favorite example is because one of the biggest groups that led to the most recent changes in the interpretation of laws of war for cyber warfare has actually been groups like Anonymous. I don't know how many of you who are attendees here are familiar with Anonymous, but they are, I don't know, they call themselves a social justice group. Not all of them call themselves a social justice group, but parts of Anonymous call themselves a social justice group. And they basically support uprisings, they hack government data frames, whatever. They support what they believe is a just cause. And Anonymous as a group was actually born off of, most of the attendees here, I'm sure, are too young to remember this, but born off of this website called 4chan, which was a meme message board. And the idea of trolling actually was born on 4chan, and Anonymous's action strategy was born off this idea of trolling. All of which is to say that a group of internet trolls who came together and said, instead of just trolling individuals, let's troll the government in support of a protest, has spiraled into this state where suddenly we are reimagining what warfare can look like, because the internet allows for a group of individuals sitting in different corners of the world to come together and target another state. And that has led to us having to reinterpret and reimagine the laws of war at a large scale. So it's something as simple as a meme messaging board gives rise to this kind of change in society. And that's a great example, I think, of how impactful small changes in technology are to our understanding of society, and as a result, the changes the law has had to make to keep up with this. So to circle back to what I was saying, I personally think it's quite impossible to study law today without that legal education and that legal training to be truly, truly interdisciplinary. And the reason for that is because there's so many currents that shape the law. The law is changing every day. And if a student has to be able to adapt, if a lawyer is supposed to keep track with these changes, then they need to be trained in being able to see a problem from multiple perspectives, to understand the different influencing factors in a given situation. And that's about it. I think I'll wrap up. I've spoken about death penalty and warfare and all of that, but point is just that interdisciplinarity is at the core of the study of law, and that's something that I also experienced in my move from law to then studying society as a whole.
I mean, yeah, like I kind of agree, and we have seen that change in the society, right? Where we have come from a society not having internet and to the society where we are being trolled online. And I really like the line which, let's say, you talked about, which is law drives the society, right? And to understand that particular line, we also have to understand the thinking behind public policy, the thinking behind a person who is into public policy, and how do we approach it? How important that interdisciplinary approach is when we are talking about, let's say, coming up with a policy in 21st century, post AI, post ChatGPT, where you can't even tell whether you're talking to a real person or not. So with that particular background, I would like to invite now Dr. Debdulal to share his views from the perspective of public policy and why it is so important in, let's say, interdisciplinary legal education.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Nishant, and my good wishes to the co-panelists as well as the attending students. Let me make life a little simpler, because my presiding panelist had a very important insights. But, whenever you talk about law, we always say that it has been seen in research that in future, it's today as well, those jobs will exist, those kind of activities will exist which robots cannot do. And I would agree, I would certainly agree, robots are doing operations and all those things. But in the court, I think this is one particular sphere or in the job market which robots cannot do, neither at the moment nor in future. You need certain human mind to be in the court to provide justice. Now, when you talk about all these things, why we are concerned about law? What is important about this? Why at all someone should study law, and that too, what my co-panelist has said, interdisciplinary. Why exactly it is? Let's think for a moment. I think, what Albert Einstein once said, that you look deep into the nature and you will understand everything better, right? So, and living in the world without insight into the hidden laws of nature is like not knowing the language of the country in which one was born, right? Now, think once again when I talk about nature law. If you violate nature laws, you are your own prosecuting attorney, judge, jury, or hangman. Right? Now, our human bodies, for example, when you talk about natural law, these are miracles, not because we live, we are talking now, you all are participating in this webinar. Why? Because our human bodies, each individuals, are a miracle of whoever has created us. Not because they defy the laws of nature, but precisely because we obey them, right? So what is good for you, the daily routine, the law that nature has created for us, eating, taking bath, walking, etc., etc. If any one of these is violated, we are gone. So therefore, what we see is that the basic human life is governed by the laws of nature. And human beings are an integral part of a society or a country or this global world. So naturally, when we talk about law becomes an integral part of our daily life. That is the importance of law. So therefore, when you talk about human being, when you talk about life, when you talk about country, it's not about something that 1 + 1 will always make 2. It may make 0 as well. It might as well make 1. So when you talk about human beings are diverse in nature. Their thinking capacities are diverse. So therefore, when we talk about the laws, we need to have different perspectives, different lenses to understand the human mind. Under what circumstances that particular human mind might have done something which needs further probe in the court of law. So therefore, when you talk about these academic, we as academics, we always acknowledge that there is a need to better integrate the theories with practice skills training in social context. Right? Now, as on date, even if you read literatures way back in 1940s, 1930s, when none of us were born, we see that from that point in time, it was over and again, it was emphasized that those Socratic methods are outdated. Why? Because we live in a market-focusing environment, and therefore, reform is needed. We change every day, we change every moment. So therefore, for a better society, reform is needed. Now, when we talk about this reform, what exactly we talk about reform? Why exactly we're talking about economics in the domain of reform, economics? These are typical terms from the social science jargon. Because economics is a subject which, if I may put in a general way, it helps you to choose among different alternatives, the best alternatives that would satisfy or that would maximize or optimize your utility. Utility means the power to satisfy wants. So what you want now, there may be n number of alternatives in front of you, and you choose one particular alternative at this moment and disregard the rest. So the subject economics helps you to narrow down to this choice. So therefore, when you talk about law, it's all about justifying the right, the property right. Right? That means whether this is justified for such and such or not. So when you do this, the knowledge of economics becomes integral. Not only economics, as I said, ultimately it's all about this human mind. So the knowledge of sociology, anthropology, psychology, everything comes within the ambit of law, and a successful lawyer cannot really overcome those aspects. And if you see the law firms today, they employ people from various backgrounds. don't trust me. Don't trust me. Just do a Google search and put in LinkedIn or any job site. The kind of law, subjects, the kind of specializations that law firms are asking for are varied. And all the major schools of law now abroad and in India are trying to come to narrow down to this interdisciplinary approach. And I'm very glad that VMLS, along with the OP Jindal Global School Law School, has done a marvelous initiative in the southern part of India, which was much needed. Now, lawyers play leading roles in business, as I said, civic affairs, government, and politics, and depending on the communication and critical thinking skills, the success of a lawyer is determined. So, when I say these things, to make things little more simpler for the listeners, lawyers, what exactly they do, what exactly they manage, because they are managers at the end of the day, right? Managing things in a way with certain logic and logistics. So lawyers manage the infidelity, recognizing patterns in context and selecting among alternatives, right? And when I talk about the selecting among alternatives, inevitably the domain of economics comes in. Now, when you talk about these, that means you are trying to solve a problem. So problem solving is not optimally effective due to the fragilities of human beings, because every human beings are different. So human nature often expresses pattern-free action. You might not have a pattern. For example, the COVID, it was a human, as we see, led pandemic. Someone had done some mistake and we all are suffering. There's no pattern before. Now, in this world, there is uncertainty when events are random or unpredictable, right? We never know what's going to happen next. So much lawyers claim to follow in a typical law school, other than the VMLS or OP Jindal. As I see the curriculum, I belong to a different university, so I'll be joining soon the VMLS. But what I saw before taking this call, that VMLS do not follow the typical pattern that other law schools follow. That means, typically following a course of logic and going ahead. But an effective law program that the VMLS has proposed, teaches adaptability. So even when you talk about interdisciplinary, when you talk about what Professor Nishant said, public policy, anything, if you have to survive, we have to get adapted to the system, adapted to the culture, adapted to the society, adapted to the country, adapted to the law of the land. Only then we can survive. So law is all about the understanding of adaptability. So when you talk about this adaptability, the typical doctrinal, typical instruction or typical way law has been taught in the country is not really sufficient to move ahead in this direction. So therefore, as on date, it's very much lacking. I repeat, it's very much lacking. But it's essential that an interdisciplinary nature of law program, legal education, should be there to for the budding lawyers, for the prospective lawyers in the country. And as I said when I started this discussion, that only those jobs or those people, those human beings will survive in the coming days, for whom robot cannot be a replacement. That means you have to adapt to the future demands, right? And that law is a typical profession which is expected to survive in that. And in that, only those which has only those kind of institutes or those kind of lawyers will succeed, who has a varied lens of understanding things, right? Not a typical 1 + 1 = 2 type of legal education. So when you talk about, I'll just finish in a minute. So therefore, when you talk about the country, the law of the land, it's all about the government, which designs the policies and designs the law, and we are supposed to obey them. And of course, in the court, when we all actually debate, we debate basically in the domain of public policies. Public policies are not really about SEZs or demand, supply, inflation. No, the constitution is also a public policy. It has been designed for the public, by the public, of the public, by certain people, and we abide by that. So therefore, the role of public policy, the importance of public policy in the domain of law is enormous. And in today's days, the kind of uncertainty, unpredictability is happening, the kind of corruption, the violence are rising, the trade wars are happening. The role of public policy is immensely important. And as I said, you have to adapt to the changing demand. You cannot otherwise, either you are there or you are somewhere else, not here. So therefore, due to all obvious reasons, of course, we'll discuss later on if there is time, the new education policy has also emphasized on this interdisciplinary approach to teaching, especially the legal education part. And is glad that I have seen the curriculum at VMLS, and I is glad that they have initiated this webinar. Of course, a much needed initiative. So looking forward to interacting with you all in the days ahead. Let me stop here.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Devdulal. And I kind of agree with you when you say that, law cannot be seen in isolation, and it has to be seen in the context of the kind of problem you're trying to solve, right? And I see a lot of questions here where students are asking for a very basic understanding of interdisciplinarity and interdisciplinary approach, right? So here, when I think about very basic, right, a famous quote comes into mind, which everyone uses it, right? Which is jack of all trades and master of none. But here I would like to change it a bit and say jack of all trades and also master of one. And if I put a context to it, which is that when you talk about being a lawyer, in today's day, you cannot be just a lawyer, because law is about solving a problem, but that problem is in a particular domain. For example, family issues, you have to understand a family, how it works. For example, an issue with a sports athlete, for example, Usain Bolt, right? First, you have to understand how that particular sports work, and then only you can apply the law to resolve that particular problem. And I'll give you a very interesting, not interesting, but an example from my domain, which is sports law, right? For example, if tomorrow Usain Bolt has to run for an Olympics 100-meter race, right? In law, how does it work? You go to the court and you resolve a problem. Suppose there is an issue with his blood sample and there is some contaminant because of which he cannot run for the race. Would he go to court and get the problem resolved? He can't, because the courts are going to take a lot of time. Right? Then how do we resolve this particular problem? Then you have to understand, okay, how does sports work? How does Olympics work? That tomorrow it is going to be, so today you need a solution. How do you propose a solution? Through arbitration, right? The arbitration panel will sit and they'll try to resolve the problem today, now, here, so that we can decide whether Usain Bolt is going to run tomorrow or not. And this is what exactly interdisciplinary approach is, where you are trying to understand various aspects of life, various different, subjects which exist, various different degrees. For example, it's a business issue. You have to understand how BBA works, how business works, right? Then only you can apply your knowledge as a lawyer, of which you are the master, right? And so on. So having said that, I hope I was able to, let's say, bring it down to a very basic nature of what it is. Now, I would like to take up the questions which are there in the chat box. Here I have like every other student, right, who is getting into a particular profession or thinking about doing a particular degree, the first question which comes to mind is, how am I going to earn money? What is going to allow me to earn money, right? So the question is basically, what are the career opportunities or 5 career opportunities in future job market demands in legal education, right? And the question is open for all the panel members. You guys can take it, even let's say all three of the panel members can take it and give, or let's say provide an overview from your particular area and from your own understanding. So over to the panel members.
Would you like to go first, Dr. Thakur?
No, please, ladies first. Let me maintain the
No, we're way past that. It's 2023, gender is a construct, all of that. Anyway.
Okay.
But so no, I have a very simple answer to the student who asked this question. And that if you are taught to look at the law in creative and innovative ways, which is what an interdisciplinary curriculum will do, right? Where you draw from different subjects and you're able to connect the dots between them, all areas of law become exciting career opportunities. And I know that sounds like such a marketing statement, so I'll explain what I mean when I say this. Now, we all know that ChatGPT has been able to reproduce human-like conversation skills at this stage. ChatGPT 4 is actually quite good at doing this. So recently, there was a question that came up within the field of family law, which is traditionally only exciting in cases of divorce and such, because most of the times it's just property disputes and inheritance. But the question was, if a person speaks to an AI chat box, and if that conversation becomes romantic of a particular kind, is it considered cheating? And does it then therefore become grounds for divorce? And this is such a fascinating question, because to answer this question legally, you need to understand what the law says on infidelity. You need to understand how the basics of how an AI chat box will work. And you need to socially understand what the concept of marriage is, the concept of cheating, and how does Indian society understand these ideas. So really, you need understanding of this problem from minimum three perspectives. So how then would we facilitate, we as law educators, how do we then train future lawyers to be able to answer questions like this? And the answer is in what Dr. Thakur was saying. It's that we need to change our curriculum. We need to update the way in which we teach. And I can only speak for VMLS because I'm here now. But one of the things we're trying to do to bridge this gap is introducing new subjects. So we're one of the first law schools in the country to introduce this subject called Science, Technology, and Society. And what this does is it teaches you to look at technology as a social object. So yes, ChatGPT is code, but also ChatGPT is now raising questions of infidelity in marriage. So how do we understand the concept of an AI chatbot from a social perspective? And understanding this will then help a future family lawyer take on these really interesting kinds of cases. So I know the question asked, are there any fascinating new career options? And the answer is all career options become fascinating if you're trained to look at them in the right way. Because then you become those cutting edge lawyers that are answering these questions and changing the face of law. So that's kind of my answer to this question. And I'll now pass it to Dr. Thakur to sort of come in.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. So let me talk about certain numbers and certain facts and figures globally. Of course, India is not an exception at the moment. So see, in this coming time, lawyers with having, this is not that I am saying, this is something that the research in this particular field, the International Labour Organization and other agencies which does research and for job market talks about. So they say that lawyers with strong expertise in the field as litigation, commercial law, real estate, employment, tax, and family law are in high demand. Now, when I say these, if you have closely listened to what I have said or read between the lines, it's all about what Samdatta had mentioned, that everywhere, anywhere in this particular domain, there is a demand for a lawyer. Now, when I talk about this demand for the job market or the lawyers, let me quote some statistics for all of you, which is easy to understand. See, this is something that the recent statistics, January to June survey, which is very latest 2023, the law firms and legal departments are hiring, right? And what are the numbers? 44% of the legal firms are hiring for new roles. 54% firms are hiring for vacated roles. Wait, hold on. 97% firms are facing challenges finding skilled talent. So that's precisely the answer for the question that has been raised. Now, the top areas where lawyers plan to, add this, the demand for contract professionals are very much rising these days. I'm just getting one example. And the job market demand said that there is a 75% demand of in the first half of 2023 up to, which is up from 32% in July to December 2022. It is rising. And the demand for contract professionals are rising, while law firms need lawyers, legal specialists, legal support. The legal department needs legal operations, legal support, compliance administration, corporate or in-house counsel, whatnot. So therefore, as long as a society moves, as long as uncertainty rises, right? And hopefully the COVID has taught us a big lesson that uncertainty is everywhere. We used to teach this in economics classes about uncertainty, unpredictability, randomness. I hope all of you have agreed that what unpredictability can be, what is its, how it looks like, what are the outcomes of unpredictability, uncertainty. As this rises, which is certain to rise in the days ahead, the need for lawyers would be exorbitant. No other professionals are in that kind of demand like a lawyer. So if you choose the right institution, if you have the right kind of curriculum training, which again, as I say, unpredictability, uncertainty, you need to have different lenses to understand the uncertainty, as just Professor has mentioned. It has different lenses. Even to probe a typical crime that has happened on road, you need to understand different aspects, right? Right from the insurance to the mentality of the biker, or the health aspects, whether he was drunk or not drunk, X, Y, Z, and so on and so forth. So therefore, there is no way out. That's all I can say. If you want to understand the society, if you want to be a good lawyer, you have to have your ears and eyes open to understand the individual, to understand the psychology, to understand the context. If you can do that, you are the champion. If not, I think I've answered to the best extent possible. Over to Nishant and Professor Krishnadev.
Yes.
So I think both Dr. Thakur as well as Samudita have really captured the essence of this question very, very well. I wouldn't say a lot. I'll just try to tie it into I would say, if we think about it in terms of three different points, the point that Samudita made, that every career opportunity can be a fascinating career opportunity. What those 3 points are, it's nothing but a summary of both my co-panelists have said. Knowledge, you have to know the basics, the fundamentals of law, principles, doctrines, cases, etc. Skill, that's the second one. That is to say, you need to understand how things actually work out there in the professional circles, whether it's a law firm, whether it's a court, etc., etc. And the third is resilience. Knowledge as well as skill today are not enough unless you also have the third element, which is resilience. And resilience encompasses a lot of things. It also encompasses the ability to apply it to completely. It also has this element of innovation in it, that you should be able to think. I think it's a fascinating point that somebody raised earlier, which is, the whole chat GPT and fidelity issue. Now, what that tells you is you would not find a ready-made answer to this question. That's partly why this is fascinating. And you can be the person who adds value to the society by being out there somewhere in a court or somewhere in a policy-making department, which actually answers this question. But in order to do that, you would need all these three things. And even if one of them is missing, the solutions that we come up might not be optimal. So know the law, study well, learn the skills, learn how things are done, the practical aspects. And thirdly, always be creative, innovative, resilient, and learn how to apply existing principles to a changing and evolving world. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to all the panelists, for taking so much time to answer one particular question and then giving different perspectives to it, right? From society to policy to legal perspective as well to it, right? Now, in the chat box, there's a specific person, who's very well informed and researched, right? Karanya has put in a question which is like which has 5 specific smaller questions to it. But I would like to take this particular question and then just to quickly answer that. When we talk about focus goal, when we talk about whether the program at VMLS is tailored to a particular student or not, this is the beauty of the curriculum at VMLS, right? It is not the institution who is going to tell you that this subject you should study. It is the student who can tailor it according to the needs of that particular student, and then come together with a student or a faculty from various disciplines, and then try to see law from different perspectives. For example, the various lists of electives from technology to media to intellectual property rights, company, public policy, sports law, entertainment, if the list goes on, right? So that is the need of 21st century, that is the need for a 21st century legal professional, that it is not just limited to law, but extending to each and every particular part of the society. And that is why we as lawyers very proudly say, and also Dr. Debrulal mentioned, that we are in every particular field. We are managing every particular field because our curriculum, because of our background into each and every particular field which is there. And then we try to provide solutions for it. And if you are a problem solver, you have a demand for yourself. If you have a demand for yourself, that is the career opportunity right there for you as a particular person who is in your class standard, 12th standard right now, or who is thinking of graduating from a particular degree and then moving towards a professional course like law, right? So having said that, if there are not any questions, then we can proceed towards concluding today's session. So before concluding, there's one more question in my chat box which talks about, which law is better, BALLB or BBLLB. Just for Ginny Chopra, I think it is not about which law is better, because you have to understand, be it BA, be it BBL, LLB, right? At the end of the day, you are going to decide what kind of subjects in law, in BBA and BA you are going to study. So it is about what you want as an individual, what kind of a lawyer you want to be, and that is the way ahead for you as that particular student, right? So with that particular answer and background into today's discussion, I would like to conclude and also thank all the panel members for taking their time out. And I would also like to, tell all the participants here today, any on the panel members, that I am sure few students are looking forward to studying from the faculty members at VMLS, looking forward to the mentorship of OP Jindal Global University. And let me tell you, Dr. Debrulal is also going to be very soon be a part of this particular, fantastic roster of faculty members which we have at VMLS, right? So don't worry, Dr. Debrulal is also not going anywhere. In fact, he's also going to join VMLS. So with that particular background, again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. Thank you so much, Samudita. Thank you so much, Mr. Chauhan. And thank you so much, Dr. Debrulal.
Thank you, everyone.
Good wishes to all. Have a nice evening.